Yo, what is good, gamers? It's me, Jackson, and welcome to part 2 of my Ace Attorney Trilogy overview series. Naturally, as this is part 2, we're going to be looking at the second entry in this series, Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney Justice for All. If you want to look at what I had to say about the first Ace Attorney game, you can look at the video linked in the top right corner. But anyways, enough of that NPC YouTube dialogue out of the way, let's begin. Okay, so first off, according to all of my research, series director and script writer Shu Takumi always planned on the Ace Attorney series wrapping up after 3 games. In other words, it sounds like from the beginning he envisioned a trilogy. So if game 1 is meant to be our introduction and naturally game 3 would be the resolution, how exactly does game 2 fit into the picture? Well, if we look at the most classic and in my opinion best formula for storytelling, the hero's journey, we can kind of get an idea for what exactly Justice for All needs to accomplish in order to serve as an effective and meaningful middle entry in this trilogy. The hero's journey starts with our hero being introduced. They have strengths, they have weaknesses, but they're generally kind of naive to the world around them. They embark on a quest, whether that's physical, spiritual, philosophical, whatever. And as they continue to learn more about the world, it feels as though nothing can stop them. Sure, they're not perfect, but they're usually able to meet most challenges where they're at, and they are gradually growing. However, eventually they are inevitably met with an insurmountable challenge. This is the moment in the hero's journey where our character will undergo some sort of death and rebirth. Now, whether this is a physical death, a spiritual death, a psychological death, whatever, it is almost always triggered by our protagonist lacking something. Through the rebirth process, though, our protagonist can acquire that very thing they need to become the better and potentially best version of themselves. When this newly acquired wisdom or item or skill or whatever is paired with the experience that they've had thus far, they are ultimately able to reach the climactic, epic finale of the story, emerge victorious, and ultimately complete their arc. So, if we frame this within the context of a trilogy, usually the first entry is meant to introduce our character and have them embark on their quest. The second entry is where our character undergoes the death, as I mentioned before, and ultimately begin their rebirth process. Finally, the third entry is where they use that rebirth experience to complete their arc and ultimately find some sort of resolution in whatever story they were pursuing from the beginning. Alright, but we didn't come here for a literature lesson. We came here for some MF Phoenix Wright. So, as we begin to examine each case, I want us to keep in mind how exactly is Justice for All pushing Phoenix closer and closer to that hero's death and hero's rebirth. How is the Phoenix that we've come to know up until now being challenged to think about things in a new way that will help his character grow and develop into the best version of Phoenix Wright possible? With that question in mind, let's begin with Case 1. The Lost Turnabout. Alrighty, so this case kicks off with an amnesia-ridden Phoenix Wright who defends Maggie Byard, a new character that has been accused of murdering her boyfriend, Dustin. The witness is Richard Wellington, and the prosecution lawyer is Winston Payne. The story goes that while Maggie and Dustin, both police officers, were on a break, they were walking around the park and discovered a lost cell phone. Maggie ran off to do something, I actually don't remember, but while she was gone, her boyfriend Dustin called a contact on that cell phone to try and relocate the owner. The owner was Richard Wellington, who again is the witness in this case. Now, Richard Wellington claims to just be your average college boyo, but in actuality, he is a big-time con artist. And since Maggie and Dustin are both police officers and were still in their work attire, he suspected that Dustin had already caught on to his true identity and got into a fight with him. Unfortunately, the fight resulted in Dustin getting pushed off of a large cliff and dying. Now, in the midst of this battle, Richard's glasses also fell off and were crushed in the impact, and that is a key detail because while you're listening to his testimonials, you will discover some very glaring contradictions and mistakes in his observations because, well, this boyo is blind AF. So yeah, I gotta say, I'm not a big fan of this case. In fact, it's actually my least favorite case in the entire Ace Attorney trilogy. I get it, they needed to have another tutorial case because, well, not everybody who played Justice for All played the first game. And even if you did play the first game, maybe you forgot how the mechanics worked. It's fine. I'm not faulting the case for being a tutorial, I'm faulting the case for just being kinda clunky. Like, I didn't really feel any of the mysteries were that interesting, and also, I don't really like Maggie. She always rubbed me as sort of obnoxious, and not in a funny way, but more so in like a, okay, please shut up and get off the screen kind of way. And I actually found myself being more interested in why Phoenix Wright suddenly had amnesia. However, that was revealed to just be a short-term memory loss caused by Richard Wellington bonking Phoenix on the head with something. In other words, it wasn't that interesting. So overall, while I don't think that this is a bad case, I don't think there's a single bad case in this trilogy. It is just very mid. But anyways, let's go over to case 2 now. Reunion and Turnabout. Okay, so if you were worried that Justice for All was going to be kind of a dummy game and wasn't really going to do anything that interesting, well, you don't have to worry because Reunion and Turnabout is a banger. First off, at long last, after one whole case, we are reunited with Maya Fey, who, for those that forgot, is a spirit channeler, the younger sister of our mentor who unfortunately passed away, and kind of just the quirky sidekick character that brings some levity to the series. It's great to see Maya again, and things are already off to a busy start as Maya has been hired to perform a spirit channeling ritual for Dr. Gray. The reason why Dr. Gray wants Maya to channel a spirit is because 1 year ago at his medical practice, 14 patients tragically died. Because of this, naturally, the media and public turned on Dr. Gray, and he's had a pretty bad reputation since then. The thing is though, Dr. Gray insists that it was not his fault those 14 patients died, and instead it was the fault of his nurse employee, Mimi Miney. Here's the problem though, shortly after those 14 patients died, Mimi Miney, along with her sister Eenie Miney, were unfortunately caught in a terrible car crash and it resulted in the death of Mimi. So, Dr. Gray wants to channel the spirit of Mimi and have her confess to essentially being responsible for the death of all those victims and clear the name of Dr. Gray so that he can start making some big bucks again. In order to, I guess, have the easiest point of connection with the spirit world, Maya Fey returns to Kudain Village, which is where her and the rest of the Fey clan are from. Phoenix tags along, and it's here that we meet two other characters. First is Pearl Fey, who is the younger cousin to both Maya and Mia Fey. She is this young little girl who's pretty funny, and she'll actually end up becoming essentially a second sidekick character, so definitely an important introduction. Her mother, who is the aunt of Maya and Mia Fey, is Morgan Fey, and Morgan is, well, a little bit suspicious to say the least. She is extremely strict about the Fey clan rituals, and she also, for whatever reason, doesn't seem to be the biggest fan of Mia and Maya's family, including her mom, who would be her sister. But we'll learn more about that later. Anyways, so once the gang is all up at Kudain Village, we're about to witness the spirit channeling, but Morgan Fey suddenly insists that this channeling be done in private, only between Maya and Dr. Gray. So those two are pushed away to a secluded room and everyone else has to wait outside. So yeah, that's already a little bit sus, but to make things even worse, immediately after the ritual begins, a gunshot is heard, and as you open the door, Dr. Gray is dead. Obviously, this makes it look like it was Maya Fey who killed Dr. Gray, but as we know Maya Fey is not that type of person, we tried to defend her. Unfortunately, it's a little bit too late because everyone else, including the authorities, blames Maya, and once again, also in the second case of the game, Maya is our defendant and she is being pressed for murder charges. So a pretty freaking strong premise in my opinion. That's already very interesting, and we're introduced to a wealth of unique characters. Now, you might suspect that we will once again be facing off against Miles Edgeworth as the prosecution attorney. But this time around, we are actually faced against Franziska von Karma, daughter of Manfred von Karma, who we battled in the last game. And quick side note, I freaking love Franziska. Not only is she a total baddie who literally carries a whip around, but she also just has a great personality and brings a really nice contrast to Phoenix Wright. Similar to Miles, she is obsessed with winning. However, unlike her father and to a lesser extent Miles, she doesn't want to do so through malicious means. She just wants to win. And I think it's really cool how this game has its own rival for Phoenix to face off against in the courtrooms. But anyways, back to Miles. He is just suspiciously absent, and it's actually suggested by Phoenix that he might have killed himself after the events of the first game. So that's definitely a little bit interesting, but we'll get to that later. For the time being though, we have to prove Maya is innocent. Now you might remember about 1 minute ago I told you that both Ini and Mimi were killed in a car crash, and well, that's sort of the truth. See, here's the thing. Mimi, the nurse girl, actually survived that car crash, and unfortunately it was only her sister Ini who died. But here's the thing. Mimi knows that if she continued to live life as, well, herself, Mimi, it wouldn't be a very pleasant one. Sooner or later, she would be caught and the blame would fall upon her for the death of those 14 patients. Essentially, it would be a life haunted by mistake, regret, tragedy, and her own failings. So, realizing that there was an opportunity for her to escape, she actually underwent Jurassic plastic surgery, also that she would resemble her sister, Ini. Because of this, she was able to live a new life as Ini. So then why was she at Kudain Village? Okay, well remember that everybody thinks that Mimi is the one who died, right? Including Dr. Gray. So it wouldn't exactly work for him and Maya to channel the spirit of Mimi because she's still alive. And this would mean her entire fake identity would be totally exposed. Not wanting this to happen, she corroborated with Morgan Fey to essentially frame Maya for the murder of Dr. Gray. But why would Morgan Fey agree to help somebody frame her family member for murder? Although not all of those answers will come to fruition during this case, the simple answer is power. Morgan Fey wants power, and right now, Maya Fey is poised to become the next leader of the Fey clan. Although Morgan is too old to assume any form of authority, she does want her bloodline to carry on the mantle of power. In other words, she wants Pearl Fey to be the heir to the Empire, not Maya. And like I said, we're not going to get all of the answers right now, because these are all contributing to the main overarching Ace Attorney storyline. But this right here is a great example of not only answering some of the questions and building off of ideas introduced in the first game, but also setting things up to eventually be resolved within the third game. And yeah, overall, Reunion and Turnabout is such a banger case. Easily one of my favorites in the trilogy. But let's move on to the next case. Case number 3, Turnabout Big Top. Now, I mentioned this in my last video, but I'm not a lifelong Ace Attorney fan, so I'm pretty unfamiliar with what the Western internet fandom for this series thinks about these cases. However, that being said, in my admittedly brief exposure to these takes, one that I saw pop up quite often is that Turnabout Big Top is big suck. Like, people hate this one. This is constantly ranked as the worst case within the original trilogy. And, well, not to sound like a sheep, but I would probably have to agree. Although the first case in Justice for All is still my least favorite of the trilogy overall, this one is sitting comfortably at second least favorite. But why is that? Well, for starters, I don't find the mystery to be that compelling. And there are a few revelations within this case that just feel like they're such stretches. I think part of the strength of Ace Attorney is that while it can be nonsensical, it's definitely rooted in at least some level of coherency, of reality. But this case takes things a little bit too far, and I just can't suspend my disbelief to that extent. When the climactic reveal is the murderer dropping an anchor out of a window onto the victim, and then the victim's cape flies off of them in the impact of the anchor and lands back into that two-story apartment room just so that the murderer can take the cape and hide it so nothing looked suspicious. Bro, that is just goofy. Like, I get that this case takes place in a circus, but for real, y'all didn't have to put the clown outfits on when you were writing the story. And look, to be fair, I will give them credit for one thing. In Turnabout Big Top, the writers attempted to create a sympathetic villain. And while I don't think it really worked in this case, spoiler alert, they try it again in the third game, and frick me, they did such a banger job in that one. So I guess if this was the sacrifice that had to be made so that we could get the eventual third game's character, it was very much worth it. I don't really have a lot else to say about Big Top. I think that the characters and setting are pretty quirky and charming, but they're just not that endearing or particularly memorable. But with that said, let's move along to the final case in Ace Attorney Justice for All. Farewell My Turnabout. This is case number 4 and the finale for Justice for All. Phoenix Wright, Maya, and Pearl Fay have been invited by Will Powers to a Steel Samurai kind of like celebration event. At this event, there will be a special press conference by the current actors for the Steel Samurai TV show, Matt Ongard and Juan Carita. Just as the press conference is about to begin, the lights are cut and Juan Carita is murdered. Now naturally, as Matt Ongard is the other lead star for the TV show, he is the suspect for the murder. But that's not even the biggest of our concerns, as during the power outage, Maya was kidnapped. And not only that, but we are told through a blackmail message that unless we can prove Matt Ongard innocent in court, Maya Fay is about to get freaking killed. And we only have one day to do it. Immediately, Farewell My Turnabout sets the tone and the pace. There is no time to waste, and there's a very real threat that Maya will be killed. Now you might remember at the beginning of this video, I talked about how it's natural in a hero's journey arc for our hero to eventually come to a death. And I would argue that Farewell My Turnabout is the perfect catalyst for Phoenix Wright's death. Up until this point, Phoenix hasn't really been challenged about his convictions or personal beliefs as a defense attorney. Sure, there were some chaotic and personally high-stake cases he took in the first game, but this time it feels much more personal, like it's cutting to his very core. Because as we discover more and more clues and evidence about the murder of Juan Carita, it becomes abundantly clear that Matt Ongard, the man we're supposed to prove innocent, is anything but. he's very much connected to this murder, and it's kind of this difficult moment where Phoenix has to question whether the law is more important or the life of Maya is more important. During this case, we're introduced to Adrian Andrews, a new character that will actually reappear in the third game, and you know, while I think she's a pretty cool lass, she's not the most interesting character in the world. She is definitely better than Maggie though, but the far more exciting revelation is that our boy Miles was not dead. He makes his dramatic return in this case, and he's a changed man. Gone are his laser-focused linear views of the law, and he now seems to feel more compassion, have a bit more nuance, and in general have a much stronger grip on what being a prosecution attorney means. Basically, our boy had a big glow up, and it is really fun to see him again, but it begs the question, if he's going to serve as the prosecution attorney for this case, then what happened to Franziska? Well, sadly, she was actually shot and very heavily injured, but she will play a crucial role in serving justice to Matt Engarde. But until that moment, Miles basically corroborates with Phoenix to artificially inflate the time required to deliver a verdict in this case. The reason why they want to extend the time is because there's just not enough evidence to definitively say who the killer was after one day. Luckily, our assassin kidnapper buddy decides to also wait until the verdict before he kills Maya. After some more digging around and uncovering more identities, we discover that Matt Engarde actually hired an assassin to kill Juan Carita, and that assassin is the very same person who kidnapped Maya. The thing is though, despite his profession, this assassin actually has relatively high moral values, or at least he very much cares about the trust between him and his clients. However, Matt Engarde was planning on blackmailing the assassin after this case blew over because he didn't want any chance of the truth getting exposed. This leaves our assassin buddy totally pissed, and so he testifies in court about the true nature of this case, and luckily in the end, Franziska gets back from the hospital with some key pieces of evidence to conclusively prove that Matt Engarde is guilty, so this not only allows us to get Maya back safely, but also deliver justice. Throughout this case though, Phoenix Wright really had to grapple with what he valued more, and you as the player also have to think about what you want most out of this case. Luckily, Pearl Fey is able to channel Mia to kind of act as a voice of compassion and guidance in this very tricky and confusing case, but eventually I believe Phoenix Wright was reborn at the end of the case. In a way, you could say, like a phoenix, he was reborn. Okay, I'm killing myself. But anyways, I really do think that Phoenix Wright comes out much stronger. He has a good, balanced view on how he needs to act as a defense attorney. Yes, it's important for him to maintain that kind and trusting heart, but he also has to be ready to side with the truth and justice whenever that is the clear answer. Oh, and this is kind of unrelated, but there's a quick moment in this case where you actually kind of get to play as Maya. It's just a quick little investigation phase, but it was really cool, and that's an idea they will also build off of in the next game in some very cool ways. Overall, Farewell My Turnabout is so good. Like, this is easily the best case in the game, and I would say it is amongst the top 3 cases throughout the entire trilogy. There is just so much going on here, yet it works together very intricately and creates a wonderful story full of suspense and satisfying payoffs for the player. I think that Justice for All ends on a crazy high note, and even though there were some lower points in this game than the first Ace Attorney, Justice for All definitely manages to capture that same sense of excitement, thrill, and just general creativity that the first game did. But yeah, what did you think about Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney Justice for All? Do you think that name is too long? Is the circus case your favorite in the entire series? Let me know in the comments below, and be sure to stay tuned for my final entry in the trilogy overview. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you all later.